So, hi everyone, welcome again to our one of the guest lecture, I would say expert lecture session for Tableau Buddy Sandbox Accelerator program. These are some of the guys who joined us. Some of them are really doing good. Some are struggling, but still trying to make up. And then we have our amazing mentors. Don't look at these two guys. They don't do much of the work. These guys are the ones who take everything from A to B actually, and I'm really proud to have this team all together. Steve, Jyoti, Lewis, Idris, Adrian Force, and today we have an addition to our team, and we have Dennis Cow, who is our guest lecturer for today. He's a multi-time Tableau visionary and a public ambassador and associate professor at Carleton University, and also co-leads Data Plus Maps, which is a great talk. And I think there's a session coming up as well for Data Plus Maps
Yeah,
soon.
May 21st. That's correct.
Yeah. I'll drop in that invite as well on our Slack as well as here, so you can catch that as well. And today, Dennis is going to take us through his expertise. I actually asked him to tone it a bit down because he just builds amazing maps. Like I don't think like in the data farm, the level of customization with the maps, like Dennis brings it in. Uh, Anybody does. So thank you so much for doing this with us, Dennis. It's really a pleasure. And thank you also for initiating the Data Plus burgers, though this year I wasn't able to catch because of some reasons. I had to get down from the train.
Uh,
That was another story. But yeah, that's an interesting thing. You have already started. So thank you so much for coming, and
mhm.
I'll not eat up more of our time because these guys are pretty much very chatty if you let them. So I'm just gonna stop my screen sharing and hand it over to you now.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen really quick. Let's see. Okay, that should work. Hopefully you can see that. Is that correct? All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a little intimidating. So one of the things that Prasan told me to do is kind of stay within the Tableau tool, kind of native functions and things like that. And it's a little intimidating to be among such great company. Obviously, I don't have as much experience in Tableau. I often use other tools to kind of manipulate shape files and spatial data and then bring it into Tableau. But this was a great opportunity for me to kind of stretch kind of my toolkit as well, and trying to kind of figure out how I would do some certain things in Tableau. And there's some great functions that I've been playing with for last couple of months that have come out, and I don't know if people really understand how they work and things like that. So I think this is a good opportunity. I welcome anybody kind of chiming in as well from the mentors or as well as the mentees. And it's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's truly an honor. So just really quickly, let's see, where am I here? Just really quick backdrop. I'm a social work professor. I've been in Canada for about 6.5 years, originally from the United States. I've been doing GIS and spatial analysis for 15 years. I was trained in ArcGIS ArcGIS ArcMap, and then I currently use a tool called QGIS, mostly to do some of my spatial analysis and spatial manipulation. But I've been using Tableau for 4.5 years, and it's been kind of my tool of choice now when it comes to the final visualizations of my maps. And this is kind of representative of my evolution, where I started in 2020. This was my first viz using Tableau. Of course, it included a map, and this is the one that I think Prasan was mentioning that I just came out with. a couple of days ago. And you can see kind of the evolution, and Tableau really has kind of brought out a creative side in me that I didn't really know I had. I've always used maps, I've always done spatial analysis, but it really was more from a functional, analytical kind of perspective to look at issues of healthcare equity and things like that. But Tableau, since discovering Tableau, really kind of discovered this creative side, and it's become kind of a creative outlet for me to kind of work on my map skills and cartography skills. Okay. So when we think about doing spatial in Tableau, I think Tableau, has really improved a lot and has really increased its spatial capacity over the past few years, especially. There's several things that you can do, but for the large part, I think Tableau still serves as a visualization tool when it comes to spatial, and then starting with some of the tools that just came out, I think it's really on the edge of becoming better at kind of doing spatial analysis, and I'll kind of talk about why. And so things like spatial parameters has really kind of opened up kind of the door to doing more spatial analysis, and I'll kind of explain how that works and why I think that. And obviously, those who are more experienced here can also chime in as well. All right, so I'm gonna kind of switch to Tableau now and kind of just work from a blank slate and kind of walk through some of my processes as I'm thinking about kind of mapping, as well as how I use mapping to kind of answer hopefully some questions in my mind that might be kind of relevance to you, but it's kind of the way I kind of go about thinking about things. All right. Okay. Just really quickly, if you go to that website that was right there, let me go to it again here. There is a growing list of spatial functions, and it continues to, with each, I think, version, they add one or two different spatial functions. And if you go to this website here, in the Tableau help, you'll see kind of all the different spatial functions that have come out, working with different like buffers, intersects, which is kind of a new tool. Things like that. And the thing is, some of these will work with, like, let's say, for the most part, I think people who use Tableau generally have a data set like Superstore, and it already has some geographic fields like city or states like that. And Tableau is great at being able to create a simple map where you can just bring in a field that has a geographic role like city, pull it in, and Tableau will automatically recognize the cities and things like that and map it put it on a map. And that's great. And you can do some of these spatial functions like buffers and things like that on that. Some of these spatial functions work only really with spatial files. And so once you start thinking about bringing in kind of your own spatial files or spatial files that you find that are provided by the government and things like that, that's where I think the creativity and kind of where it really starts to open the door to doing much, much more in terms of spatial analysis. And so one thing to kind of think about is, yes, if your data set has a city field, you can definitely pull it in. There's really so much more that you can do if you start kind of bringing in other data sources and spatial data sources and start layering them on top of each other. All right. Okay. I'm going to be providing the link for all the mentees, a link to this folder, which has basically 3 data sets. One is a data set of collisions in the city of Ottawa over the past, I would think, I think 5 to 6 years. And then a shapefile of schools in the Ottawa area. And then finally, a shapefile of the wards in Ottawa, which are basically kind of these administrative units or neighborhoods in Ottawa. And there's, I think, 24 wards that make up the Ottawa city. All right. So I'm going to primarily be using these data sets here. And And I'll provide these at the end of the presentation. And feel free, I'm totally informal, so feel free to chime in if you have any questions, if I'm going too fast or I'm going in a wrong direction, especially if, definitely chime in. Otherwise, I'll just keep on going. I don't see you all, so, feel free to just to kind of chime in by just simply kind of speaking out. Okay, all right. So really quickly, just to demonstrate, I have this kind of quick data set table of populations by provinces. I'm just going to simply copy it and then plop it into Tableau, like so. And then once this data sits here, obviously there's the province field here, which has a geographic role defined as state and provinces. You can obviously bring that over and plop it into the view and create a map like this. And I have a population data, which I'm going to pull into color, and then you can quickly create a map. And I think for most cases, I would say, especially in an environment that you need to kind of create things quickly, plop things into a database, a dashboard or a report, I think a map like this would suffice, I think, right? I don't work in that space, and so I don't quite understand how quick things need to happen. I generally kind of spend a little bit more time on my maps, but I think for a lot of use cases, I think this map would be suffice, right? If you needed a quick population map of Canada, this would suffice. I mean, the cool thing is now that map layers have come out, you can start layering things a little bit. And so you can add additional information, right? So I'm just gonna add province again as an additional layer, right? So now I have 2 layers presented by spots. And you can, so instead of a choropleth map, right, you can create, let me turn this to circles. And now you can create what's called a graduated symbol circle map as well. And so there's different things you can do. So I have 2 map layers here for those who aren't familiar with map layers. So map layer 1 is the provinces, and then map layer 2 are the circles or the symbols that represent the population size here. And in some cases, I prefer this because a choropleth map actually will mask some of the smaller areas and really enunciate or highlight the bigger areas. And so something like this actually kind of works well to a graduated symbols map, works well to kind of highlight and really create a map that's unbiased toward the large areas, right? Okay. So I've done this, I had a simple table with geographic roles. I was able to kind of create a quick map. And for most purposes, I think that works really well. All right. Now the question is, once you start getting into data that Tableau doesn't quickly recognize, and it doesn't have a geographic role and things like that, right? And so things like locations of schools, right? You're not going to be able to have a field, a data like just a table data set, and unless you have latitude and longitude and things like that, right? And so we're going to kind of construct a series of maps to kind of highlight some of the functions, right? Okay. So first things first, what I'll do is bring in. And for those who aren't familiar with shapefiles, this is what a shapefile kind of looks like. It's a kind of it's an older file format. It's people have tried to move away from it, but it still remains one of the staple kind of file formats that is widely used and is recognized by Tableau. But it's made up of like maybe 5 to 8 different files. And when you're working with it, what you're really most interested in is as long as all the files have the same name and you don't move them, they all contained in the same folder, and you don't have to worry about it. All you really need to worry about is to add the file that has the SHP extension. So you can add data set data sources, obviously by adding another data source. What I usually typically do is I will just kind of drag it into the worksheet, and now it's added as a data source, and then I can add the geometry to the view, and this is the city of Ottawa, and it's broken out by the 24 different wards. Prasad, did you have a question?
Yes, Dennis. So once you were showing us this folder which has all these different files,
Yeah.
I kind of know that okay, shp.shp extension is kind of the shape file, but I've always
Yeah.
wondered, like, all these different, do they contain some essential information?
Yeah,
Or
that's a good question, and usually I don't worry about it.
Mhm.
Like, so when I was trained, like they kind of quickly glossed over it, and so that was an indication to me that I don't really have to care about it that much. But there's a couple of things to note. So this DBF data set file is basically the database, right? So if I open it, I don't know if I have the right. It used to be that you can open it in Excel, but it kind of Excel kind of changed a little bit. So I don't know if I could open this anymore, but let me see if I can open it. But this is basically the database right here.
Okay.
Let me see if I can open it as just a text edit. Yeah. So it's going to look kind of, yeah. So it's basically, you can see kind of the beginnings of the table, right?
Right.
And so that's that. This projection is what defines the actual projection, but in Tableau, because you're primarily using the Mercator projection,
Mhm.
you don't really have to worry about that. And these others, I don't really know.
Okay. That's fair. At least I got to know two of them. So
Yes. Okay.
it's
So
a win for me. Thank you.
So if you're able to open this database, and I used to be able to open in Excel, but for some reason, I think in the last 5 or 6 years, it it became a little bit more challenging. I don't know if there was a format compatibility issue or things like that, but I used to be able to kind of directly format the database here, like add stuff, add fields, and then it would be included in the data here as well. So, I mean, this is the table here, right? Essentially, but you can view that in Tableau. But I used to be able to kind of manually do it in the database file as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm. And so let me throw in the names of the wards. So then it will disaggregate the data. And so you can see as I hover over, these are the different wards. I live in the Barhaven East ward here. This is the downtown area. And just for reference, let me throw in a couple of background layers. I usually have these turned off. Just to give you a little bit more, and let me just go back a little. So Ottawa is located in Ontario, kind of on the eastern side of Canada. And we're about an hour away north of the US border, New York State. All right. Okay. So one of the tools I want to just quickly show you is the union tool and the outline tool. Okay, so the union tool is this kind of nifty little tool where, so right now I have a shapefile or a layer has Ottawa broken out into 24 wards. And so the union tool will basically merge all these polygons into a single polygon, right? So let me just do that quick calculation here. So this would be, and so that then the resulting polygon will be basically the city of Ottawa, right? So union, and then I want if you take a look at the directions, you need to have a geometry field here, which is defined by the shape spatial file, right? I don't think it can handle geographic role data, right? So I'm going to drag the geometry file there. And so that's the simple calculation. And what you end up with is another geographic field, which I named Ottawa. And if I drag that over, now you'll notice that now I have a single polygon that represents the city of Ottawa, right? Okay. And so you can kind of start, and this is kind of the beginnings of Tableau being able to manipulate spatial files, right? So we had a spatial file that had 24 marks or 24 wards or polygons. And then I created another layer that now merged all of those into a single polygon, okay? And so that's an example of what I would call kind of data manipulation, right? Okay. The other feature is outline. And what I'm gonna do quickly is I'm gonna create what an outline, oh, let me take a step back. What an outline function does, and I will turn on. So what it does, it will return a polygon and just have just the outline of that polygon. Okay, and so in this case, I'm going to do Ottawa, the Ottawa geography. And what it's going to return is another geometry field that is basically a line that borders or outlines, right, in this case, right, using the function name, outlines that polygon. And so let's push OK. And then when I drag that over, you're not going to be able to really see it. So let me turn off a few of these things. So I'll turn off that one, and I will fade this a little bit, like so. But you can start seeing, and let me turn this really black. You can see the outline now. Like typically the kind of the native Tableau border is really thin, and you can't really manipulate it. But when you turn this into a line, now you can change the thickness of the line, right? And so in this case, like I can make it really thick, or I can make it, you know, as thin as possible. But you'll notice that now, and I think one of the purposes of this could be just to kind of create a kind of more aesthetically pleasing map, right? Where you have kind of this hierarchy of lines, right? So you have the border of the wards, which are kind of like this light line, right? And then you have a more thicker line to outline the city borders, right? And that could be a good way to kind of create this hierarchy and differentiate the different lines that might make up a map. And so, you know, another place that, you know, and so if you think of states within counties, within, you know, counties within states, within countries, you can have like 3 levels of lines that kind of depict the different lines there. And just another way to make kind of a map a little more clearer, aesthetically pleasing, and things like that, right? Any questions about that? Okay, so outline, union, those are kind of the 2 kind of functions like that, right? Okay, all right. All right, next thing, really quick. So let's go to our data here. The next thing I'm going to add our collision data, which is in a CSV, comma separated values file format. I'm going to just drag that into the worksheet, and now I have that here. And you'll notice that in this field, because of the CSV, it included some latitude and longitude fields, and what we can do is plot those as points using the make point function, right? And I think people are kind of familiar with this one. This has been out for a while. So collision, I'm going to call this collision points. And then the basic function is make point, and you would basically put in your latitude and longitude. You could also do it with X and Y coordinates as well. And people have taken these functions, obviously, and created non-map kind of visualizations as well, which is really cool, right? Okay, so I'm going to make point here. What it'll do is create a geometry field representing the collision points, and I can plot those into the view. I'm going to, right now it's a single kind of mark, and so I need to differentiate them. I'll disaggregate them by ID. And now I think, yeah, you can see that there were 74,000 marks, collisions over the past, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, all right? Okay. And just to make this a little easier, what I'll do is maybe focus in on, there's another field called number of pedestrians that were involved. I'm just gonna filter it by, I just want to focus on the collisions that involved at least one pedestrian here. And so basically I pulled that in and made the range from 1 to whatever, it looks like 3, up to 3. And so, and assuming that the ones that had no pedestrians were just like maybe automobiles crashing into each other, right? Okay, and so that actually kind of clears up the dots a little bit more. Okay, so there's a couple of things, I mean, you can do with this automatically, because, you know, right now it doesn't quite make sense what's going on. And what I can do is add the Ottawa wards as well, just to kind of give us better sense of what's going on. It's kind of hard to kind of figure out what's going on here. I mean, there's just a lot of dots. This is the, let me turn off the selection. This is the downtown area of Ottawa. Again, I live around here. And so obviously in downtown, a lot more people, a lot more cars, things like that. It's, let me drill down a little bit to kind of take a look at what's kind of going on there, okay? And then obviously you can add different things. So we can add some background layers to kind of, like, if we wanted the streets to just give some context, that helps, I think. And I'll just leave it like that. Actually, let me add the base just to kind of, no, that kind of, let me just leave it at the streets, just to keep it simple. Okay. And we'll drill down to the downtown area. And so you can kind of notice this. So one of the things you can quickly do, right, because this is really hard to see what's kind of going on. Tableau has this density function, kind of option for your mark. And so if you click on density, it'll start, and I've started kind of playing with this a little bit. You can kind of create a density map really quick just to see, and to kind of start exploring the data. Let me change it to like something like this. And then you can actually increase the size of the marks a little bit to kind of showcase. Obviously, again, I mean, nothing surprising. The highest density of collisions involving pedestrians occurred in the downtown area, and you'll notice it once we go apart from this. Umar, do you have a question?
Yes, I do, Dennis.
No, not at all.
So with map layers,
Yes.
one of my favorite things I like to do with maps is create hex maps, because I think they're a very clever way of visualizing data for maps.
Yep.
Is there a way of doing that with a map layer of the outline of a map? So outline of a map. So let's say with the London boroughs, you can have an outline of London, and then you can have the hexagons that represent the boroughs.
So I know how to create the hex bins, and I'm assuming that's what you're talking about, right? You use the hex bin X, hex bin Y functions to kind of create the X and Y coordinates for the bins. You can define them, how many bins you want and stuff like that, and you can plot that over. I think the challenge with that, what I found, and I've tried to I've scoured the internet to kind of figure out if there's a way to make that into a map layer and then add additional things like that. But everything I've seen, and maybe some of the kind of more tenured folks here in Tableau can maybe has an answer. Everything I've seen adds the hex bin X and coordinates to the row and columns. And I've tried using make point. I've tried using other kind of things to try to add it as a layer. It doesn't seem to be working. So to kind of add it as a map layer, I even tried to, actually I have another kind of document that I was playing with some of this data in preparations for that. Even adding it here and then adding another layer, it wasn't working out. Like I couldn't get it to work. And I think there's something else that you have to do in order to kind of make it happen. I just don't know what that is.
Okay, thank you, Dennis.
Yeah, and one of the things I will always say in my presentations is, if you really want to get into spatial data, Tableau is great at visualizing it right now, and it's starting to kind of break into kind of the more spatial analysis stuff. But really, if you really want to work with spatial data, I would encourage you to bring in some sort of GIS tool into your belt, your tool belt, just because there's specialized data. And so what I've done was I've created hexagons in GIS and aggregated the data based on those hexagons, and then I brought that in as a shapefile. And then now you can start kind of then you have a number of different options to play with different layers and stuff like that. Yeah. All right. So that's one thing you can do. So density, it's kind of fun. It looks kind of cool. I actually use the density, that penguin of Antarctica map. I actually used this density option to kind of showcase the marks of the locations and the count of the penguins. And so I think there's a time and place for this, and it looks cool. Things like that. And it really, I think it does do a good job at kind of showcasing kind of where the hotspots are and things like that. I think the challenges for me oftentimes with this is, I don't know what Tableau's doing here. Like, I don't know, so coming from a GIS space where I actually would calculate kind of the actual density function. And there's a lot more options in terms of kind of how big, how there's various calculations you might have to kind of be aware of in calculating the density map. I don't fully know what Tableau is doing here, and so I think so that's part of the challenge, right? Like, it's great, it's easy. I think it creates it gives people the ability to create a quick density map. But from a GIS perspective, I'm not clearly 100% sure what Tableau is really doing here, and so there's not like a whole lot of confidence I have in kind of showcasing this in, like, say, more academic or policy worlds, because I'm not quite sure how to explain how this density map was created. Does that make sense? But anyways, I think from a visualization perspective, I love it, right? I think like this, maybe I'll choose a different color because I'm not liking this. Sorry. You get a sense of my kind of nitpickiness when it comes to maps. I'll play with this. I'll play with all these colors and kind of go back and forth, kind of trying to figure out what works the best. But anyways, this is the one that I use for the penguin. I noticed that kind of the colors kind of are similar to the ones in my penguin map. But okay, so that's that. But let me turn them into circles again. All right. All right. Okay. So one of the things I really wanted to show before we end is kind of the use of spatial parameters, at least my understanding of them. And I think how I think it really starts to open the door to what I think of when I think about geospatial or spatial analysis. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw in the school data set as well. So it's a shapefile of schools in Ottawa. And then I'm just going to add this as another geometry. And you'll notice that it got added. So let me kind of play with these a little bit. So schools are here. Collision points, let me turn that red, make them a little smaller. Oh no, opacity smaller, like so. So we can still see it. I'll make the schools black. They need to be circles, so, and I need the name of the school. So sorry, I'm just kind of talking through my process. Let me know if I'm going way too fast. So now we have schools that are in are symbolized by the black circles, and then the collisions are the little red circles. And I try to kind of adjust the opacity and the size to kind of so that we can still see them with the schools. Okay. All right. And for simplicity, let me just focus in on the elementary schools. Okay. So the question could be, I have a kid who's going to I'm looking for elementary schools, and I want my kid to go to an elementary school that's safe. And safe could be defined by a number of things, but maybe it could be kind of how many cars are driving, are there a lot of accidents in the area, like if our kids are walking to school, things like that. So the number of questions could be kind of maybe addressed, like if we have this data. So we have 3 different layers that are on top of each other. So we have wards, collision points or locations, and then schools, right? And so when I think how I define geospatial analysis, or when I think about spatial analysis, is now that we have this data situated in the same view, right? Can I analyze the relationship between those layers, right? Does the location of schools, is that somehow related to the location of where all the collisions are happening? Are there particular wards with schools that are kind of more disproportionately impacted by traffic collisions, right? And so geospatial analysis is when you can really start to analyze across layers or across data sources. Up to this point, like before spatial parameters, what you really needed to do is join all of these in some fashion to create a data model prior to analyzing all of this, right? And we can do that, but depending on how much data you have, that could take a long time to render and eventually get to this point where you can actually analyze the entire data, right? And so before spatial parameters, I think what I would have done is basically spatially join all these files together so that I can start looking at the locational kind of relationship or geographic location between these. And I think that's still an option for a lot of cases, especially if you're not working with a lot of data. I still kind of do that for my own research data, because as I collect data, I'm not collecting millions of data points, right? I might have 100 data points, 200 data points, and so it's still a little bit manageable, at least in my research. But I don't think that's possible out there when you're talking about kind of thousands or millions of kind of clients or things like that, right? And spatial parameters is, I'm still trying to understand the full functioning of spatial parameters, but I think that's the start of now being able to work between these different data sources. So map layers allows us to bring these different data sources separately without worrying about the data model, and plot them and visualize them together as map layers, right? And so that's a great thing about map layers. Now the question is, how do we analyze across these map layers without worrying about the data model? And I think spatial parameters is a good step towards that direction. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm just going to go through kind of this quick little process to kind of showcase the potential of spatial parameters. All right, okay. So again, I have 3 different layers defined by 3 different sources. And so what I'm going to do really quickly is I'm going to create a parameter, and I'm going to call this select a ward. And now there's this new option with the latest versions of Tableau called spatial. So spatial parameter, and I'm going to define that spatial parameter by the geometries of the wards. Okay, and what you'll notice that what gets entered is not the name of the wards, right? They're actually the geographic parameters, the latitude and the longitude of all the points that make up that polygon, right? And so I'm going to create that parameter. And then let me show that parameter so we can kind of see. And so currently there's a parameter that's being selected. I don't know what parameter that is, right? Because it's not defined by its name, but it's defined by its geographic coordinates. But we can do a couple of things. So I'm going to use that outline function again. And what this parameter is, it's a geometry field, right? Did you notice that? So you can treat it as a geometry field. So I'm going to create an outline over the selected ward. And then I'm going to go, and then what that does is creates another geometry field, selected ward, and it's going to be the outline of the ward that's being selected right now. So I'm going to click on that. And if it works well, there you go. Okay. Right. So this ward is selected right now. You see that? Okay. And I'm going to create a quick action so that I can select different wards just to show. So this is select ward based on the select ward, that new parameter. And I believe it's the geometry there. Okay. And so now what it should do is, let me get rid of the map options. What it should do is when I select a particular ward, oh no, I don't know why. Okay, there we go. Of course, it doesn't work now. let me go back to my action. Let's see. Always in the demo, right, guys?
Yeah.
Let me try this one. Okay. Oh, why? I know why. Sorry, my bad. I haven't named these words. So let's try that now. Let me go back to the action. I picked the wrong field. It works so smoothly in practice. So bad. So you'll notice, okay, you see that happening? Now that you can kind of deal with the highlighting and stuff like that, but for time's sake, I'm not going to address that. But as I'm selecting a different ward, it selects a different ward, and this gets repopulated. The parameter gets repopulated. Okay, so now that we set that up, what we can do now is use the intersect tool and get schools within selected ward. So what I can do is highlight the schools that are within that selected ward, all right? And so I'm using the intersect tool, And what that does, it returns a Boolean, true or false. Are these things in the geometry or are they not? Okay, so it's a true and false Boolean. Okay, and so I'm going to say, and whether they intersect. So I'm going to bring in the parameter. And then, well, actually, no, sorry, my bad. I need to go to the schools data source and create this calculation. So schools within selected ward, and hopefully this works. So intersect, So select a ward, and then the geometry from the schools, right? So this is the geometry field from the school data source, okay? And I'm push OK. And what I can do is I'm going to go to the schools mark card, and I'm going to change the color to for the schools. And you'll notice, hopefully, let me turn this. If I go dark, okay. You'll notice that the schools in this ward are now orange. And if I change the ward, a different ward, it changes. So now these schools are orange versus all of these, right? And then for the sake of time, I'm not going to fiddle with the formatting. But you'll notice now, okay, so what happened? I started with the wards. I created a spatial parameter that allowed the user to select a particular ward, right? And then I used the intersects function to establish an intersection, whether these two geometries intersected, the schools and that spatial parameter, okay? And so the spatial parameter, right, obviously is based on the ward data source. The schools is based on the school data source. And now you start seeing that, okay, we're actually interacting across two different map layers from two different sources, right? And what we can do is now we can create a table based on that intersect tool. And so let's just throw in the name of the schools and so forth. And so if I select a different ward, like this ward up here, actually that was a bad choice, huh? That did not work, that dark background. My bad, okay. You'll notice that the schools get selected, but then the schools in the table, now these are the schools within that selected ward. Does that make sense? Let's do it again. We'll go to this one, this ward here. And then again, there's different schools that are in this ward, right? And we can, let's go into, let's see. Okay, so now you can start seeing, okay, now it actually gets a little, right? Like we can actually kind of start getting into, okay, now that we've been able to select the schools, right? We can get into how are they related to the collision data now, right? We can build buffers, we can do kind of all the different things, right? But hopefully this gives you a sense of maybe the potential power of spatial parameters. They just kind of came out. There hasn't been a whole lot of hoopla around them. I really have pushed, there's a couple people at Tableau that really have been trying to push that. You really need to kind of put this out there because I don't know if a lot of people are really fully aware of the potential of this. And I think this is kind of, it's gonna, and then hopefully it'll get better over the years as people start adopting this and as they kind of start kind of improving kind of the interactivity between kind of these map layers. But this is a great start, right? This is kind of starting to get into what I kind of in my mind define as spatial parameters. Okay. And I think that, for the sake of time, I'll just end there. Just a couple maybe last bits here. Let me show my screen. I won't do the QA. Hassan wanted me to, give you some homework. And so I provided the data sets. It's here in this Google Drive. But you can get the Google link there. I'll provide this to Prasan, this slide deck. And the idea is really to kind of just create your best map, highlighting the issue of traffic collisions near schools in Ottawa. And then I was asked to make a plug for the next Data Plus Maps Tableau user group. It's May 21st, coming up, a couple of weeks. But thank you so much for your time. And I'll entertain any questions if there's time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dennis, for taking us through. I think some of the things I never knew, like even outline and union exists. So it was really useful for me, and I can see great use cases for the parameters, the spatial parameters.
Yeah.
So it's in the latest one, so I'll have to update my Tableau public, right? Yeah. Cool. Zad has a question. Go ahead, Zad. It's a free forum. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you, Dennis. It was an amazing session. I do have a question, but it's not related to spatial analytics specifically. However, it's related to map layers.
Mhm.
So, if I'm allowed to share my screen just to have a better look.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm not sharing my screen anymore. So yeah, of course.
Is my screen visible to everyone?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Yeah, so this is a personal project where I'm currently working on. And this view was built, specifically this sheet was built using map layers, where I have different layers to just to put the dashboard image and these shapes and the names. However, I wanted to probably it will be more than 500 views. So I don't want it to be scrollable. Like I want to have a pagination sheet where users can just navigate, to have a better user experience. So I have different calculations. Like first, I do have a parameter where user can sort the data either by the date it was nominated for the visit of the day, or by views, or by favorites. So let me just show you a couple of calculations. This is the sort by calculations. And then I do have the rank one, where I rank by the option where the user selects. And finally, I do have this true or false filter, if just to return the specific range of the filters. However, when I put the filter over here, like the shapes disappear. I'm not sure why.
That's more of a Tableau question, right?
And I'm pretty sure that my calculations are correct because I tried to troubleshoot in a table view, like they do return the correct values.
So you're having the same coordinates for this, or how you are basically indexing them?
Yes, it's the same calculations actually.
No, no, because see, map layers are all about coordinates, right? So it's all about like if you're getting the right coordinates, because you're indexing to move between pages or like move the numbers basically, right? So if you because can you go back to the map?
Yeah, sure.
So
I
it's
think,
more.
I think all of them should be placed in the same layer. Like they just filter the IDs itself.
Okay.
So this one, I believe it acts as a placeholder for everything.
Okay, so this is basically you're dividing by columns and rows.
Yes.
Okay, then it shouldn't happen actually. Like, and how is your index or page number working?
Like
Have you tried to add the context? Maybe that should be there.
Yeah.
this filter. Doesn't show a context.
It's basically a table calculation, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
it's a table calculation. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess in this case, you instead of using a table calculation, you need to convert it into a level of detail
Also,
calculation.
Adrian, this column and rows are also table calculations. So maybe he has to go and there he has to take this field as a reference.
Yeah, I mean, he needs to kind of identify something like a level of detail calculation in this case. For sure. That one then you can add to the filters. You know?
So I guess like it's something feasible in Tableau to do. Like it's not
Yeah,
a behavior.
Yeah, it's somehow interfering with your data on the layer, so it's not a
Yeah.
big deal. Should be fine. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
bug your mentor, or you can bug me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Definitely after the session.
Yeah, let me know and then we can
Thank you
help
so
you out.
much.
No problem. Okay, so yeah, I think it's good. And once Dennis will share the link with me, I'll share that link with you all, the homework as well. And it's applicable for all the people who are attending, especially Steve. Yeah, so hope to see your dashboard. And I know Omar will be doing it, so I don't have to say about that. Yeah. And before we end up, again, thank you so much, Dennis, for doing this with us. And it was kind of helpful. And I've already taken so many notes. And before we leave, if you all can, if it is possible, please come on the camera. I'll just take a screenshot because I'm a LinkedIn guy. Yeah, you can do that, Steve. I don't mind, actually. Anyone else coming up? Adrian Force. Yeah. Yeah, I think that kind of poses will be better for. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to take a screenshot. I don't know what to say. Yeah, what to do. Yeah. Steve, you ready? Yeah, please give me a pose, a nice one. Or are you taking it? This is going on LinkedIn for sure. Nice. I'll send you the screenshot. This is really fun. Thank you so much, Dennis, again. And
No, thank you so much. Great seeing everybody. Thank you.
yeah. And you can definitely check out his other sessions on different tags. If you want to go deep into QGIS, that's his specialty, and you can actually modify the maps in just one of the best ways. Also, Dennis, I have one question. Generally, let's say when you are doing this analysis, your preferable tool is QGIS, but how about like how to find those spatial files? So, like any particular place should I go for finding those spatial files, or basically only government websites? Any tip for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. There was kind of a movement a few years back where different cities were creating these open data portals. And so if I'm looking to map things in a city, I often will go see if that city had an open data portal. And usually they'll kind of plop various data sets there, and sometimes includes some spatial files because that maybe their GIS or their urban planning department might use to kind of to map out and plan kind of the city landscape and things like that. So so for example, for this one, Ottawa has an open data portal. That's where I got the collision data. That's where I got the ward data, as well. I mean, actually all of them, and the school data. So, and usually they'll kind of tell you how updated they are and things like that. OpenStreetMap is also another great place to go. OpenStreetMap is kind of a Wikipedia of maps, right? Like, so there's contributors volunteers who kind of contribute to this map. And it's kind of a great tool, especially during kind of certain disasters where volunteers will just kind of gather together in the internet web space and just start mapping kind of different things based on satellite images and stuff like that. And it's been served as a quick way to map out kind of changes in disaster areas. And it's really accessible, and it's all open. It's like, just like the name, it's all open. It's free data and stuff like that. And there's a website that I particularly go to that you can download. Like, I think it's just this guy who just updates and provides extracts of OpenStreet data like buildings, roads, places of interest, parks, things like that. He'll update it on a monthly basis, and so I'll provide that link in the slide deck as well.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dennis.
Yeah, no problem.
If you can also please share the links of your sessions,
Yeah.
if it is possible.
We'll definitely do that.
help us.
Yeah, I will definitely do that on a separate page. Yeah, before I send it to you.
Sure. Thanks so much. I'll first stop the recording, and then these guys can raise hellfire and go to